All right, welcome to the latest episode of Starting Five here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. Producer today is Manny Chang. The sponsors today are All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at allproconstructionbuilders.com. Our friend Danny and his team. You know the hurricane season here is around the corner. It always is. So you got to get those storm windows, those storm doors. Also, need any renovations for your house? This is a fully licensed building contractor. Check them out at allproconstructionbuilders.com or on Instagram. You can find all the work that they do, or a lot of it, 305-484-4429. They're based in Miami-Dade County, but also service Monroe and Broward counties. Again, it's 305-484-4429. Reach out to Danny, mention Five Reasons, and you get 10% off your entire order. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Get your initial deposit matched up to $100. We talk about Prize Picks all the time. It's the number one fastest growing sports product in the country. It was voted that last year, actually. And you can play anything there, not just NBA, but also they got the NFL futures on there, Stanley Cup playoffs, MLB, MMA, everything. And it's real simple. You just play up or down on player props. That's it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players together. As much as you want. You can pair players from different sports. Go flex play, power play, depending on how much you want to risk and how much you want to make. So go to Prize Picks. Use the code 5. Get that initial deposit match up to $100. But again, you have to deposit to get the match. All right. Well, now we have a matchup. So we're going to talk today about the Celtics and the Heat. We've got a lot of content that's on the channel or is going to be on the channel or is on the podcast feeds. Did 3 preview episodes here. One really long deep dive that Greg, Brady, and Alex did. Another episode that I did, I believe, with Alex the day before. And then I did one with Amy Audibert yesterday, just getting into all the matchups of this series. And here's what we know, and I'm surprised that we know it. Mazzulla, the new coach of the Celtics, he apparently doesn't know the rules here because the rules are you're supposed to wait until the last possible minute to tell the opponent your lineup. So yesterday came out and said that Robert Williams would be starting, which took away one of the great mysteries here before this series begins because he didn't have to give away that information until about an hour before game starts. Maybe make Eric Spoelstra adjust to it. Instead, he just came clean at the very beginning. Thank him for his honesty, I guess. That Robert Williams is going to stay in the starting lineup, which means that the Celtics are going to play big. They're going to go with Horford and Robert Williams in their front court, which means that the Heat can counter big and stay with the starting lineup that they had in the last series. Now, I don't necessarily think Kevin Love is going to start every game in this series. I do think he'll start game 1 now. But beyond that, if you look at the matchups, and I talked about this on a previous starting 5, it looks like Caleb Martin is a guy who's going to get a ton of looks in this series. He did not play a lot in last year's Eastern Conference Finals. If you look back at it, you'll see that his minutes declined over time. I don't think they'll decline into this series. They need him to guard Brown. They need him to guard Tatum. At times, they don't have P.J. Tucker to do that this year, and this is another place where they may matter, even though if you look back at the way that everything played out with Caleb and P.J. this year, it's clear that the Heat made the right decision. And again, just to go back on that, they couldn't really have both, not if they were going to stay out of the luxury tax. That's kind of how this played out because both of them wanted their deals. These were players, Tucker, last deal pretty much of his career, and then Caleb, the first deal of his career. And so looking at that, Caleb wanted the full mid-level, and PJ wanted the 3 years, and you couldn't really do both, okay, without staying under the luxury tax. And so that's why they ended up with Caleb instead of PJ. And Caleb is going to be a key player in this series. But there are others, okay? If you look at the lineups, the way that they're playing out, if you're going to bring Caleb off the bench, you're bringing him off the bench with Kyle Lowry. Those two are going to play a ton together. Kyle's also going to play a lot with Gabe Vincent since you don't have Tyler Hero. We saw that in the last series. The Celtics have a lot of guards. They're going to bring Brogdon off the bench. They're going to bring White off the bench. So you're bringing it's a starting backcourt that they're bringing off the bench. And so with that, Miami's going to have to be on point throughout because, look, Brogdon's the type of guy, he gets on a run, he makes 3 or 4 threes. That changes the entire nature of the game. And the Celtics are not going to play a lot of guys. Their bench has gotten better because of Brogdon. It hasn't necessarily gotten a lot deeper in terms of the players that Joe Mazzulla is going to play as opposed to the guys that Ime Udoka played last year. So I would expect the Celtics to be playing heavy minutes to about 7 guys. 8th or 9th guy gets some minutes, We saw that a little bit in the last series with Thibodeau, where he had this great bench the entire season and then quickly got hurt, and he pretty much didn't play anybody. We moved Grimes to the starting lineup, moved Hart to the bench, but just played pretty much Hart and Hartenstein any kind of significant minutes. I think you're going to see that in this series as well with what the Celtics do. Now that Robert Williams is starting, you could see a little bit more Grant Williams than he's played in the playoffs. Grant Williams is a guy who's had some big playoff moments, remember, against Milwaukee last year, but has also had some big moments against the Heat, so he could play some here as well. But as we go forward here, and again, we appreciate everybody for tuning in this morning. When you look at this particular matchup, I was looking at it compared to last year, and I'm like, all right, what's going to make this thing different? Now, the Heat last year had home court advantage. We saw that in the end, it did not matter. That it came down to one shot at the end, or maybe people would like to say two shots, with Struce's shot being changed from a 3 to a 2. But also Jimmy's three that he said he would take again, and he said he'd be back here last year for an opportunity to take it, and now here he is. But you look at the two teams from that series and this series, and here's one major advantage that Miami has that not really everybody is talking about. The Heat are actually healthier this year than last year. Now, it sounds crazy to say that because they don't have Tyler Hero, but Tyler was banged up during the playoffs last year also. At least he was playing, but he wasn't playing well, and then he did miss some time. And then Lowry was not anywhere close to where he is right now. Maybe Kyle has not lived up to the contract, and I don't think anybody could argue that he has. And maybe it's disappointing that he's, not a 35-minute-a-game starter, which is what they projected him to be when they got him. But he's a hell of a lot better right now than he was a year ago at this time. Okay, because, if you remember, he summoned one game against Boston, Game 6, where he was the guy who helped Jimmy the most in that game to get that thing back to Miami, and what was a really great win. That Game 6 in Boston is going to get lost a lot in Heat history because they didn't win the series. It's funny with Game 6s. It always kind of depends what happens in 7, whether you remember the 6, right? That's not just in basketball, but it's in baseball too. If you look at the 75 Boston Red Sox, Carlton Fisk's home run in 6, but people remember it because they finished the thing in 7. And of course, with the Heat, Ray Allen's shot in 2013, yes, people would always remember it, but would they remember it to quite the same degree if the Heat had bleeped the bed in Game 7? Instead, the Heat won in Game 7, and what in a lot of ways was actually a better game than Game 6, but nobody really remembers it. They remember Ray Allen's shot, but they remember Ray Allen's shot because they won Game 7 and finished the deal, right? Okay, so in this particular case last year, a lot of people don't really focus on that Game 6 because the Heat lost Game 7. But Lowry was tremendous in that game. Really, really good. You may be able to get 2 or 3 of those out of Kyle in this series as opposed to 1. So that's helpful. Okay. Tyler's situation, it's not helpful to have Tyler Hero out of the lineup. I don't really want to have that conversation because I think it's unfair to Tyler and it's unfair to the facts. Tyler Hero would help them. Okay. Now, there are certain things that they've done, though, knowing that Tyler is out, that I do think have helped them advance here, is that other guys have filled those roles. They know what their roles have been. And look, the reality with Tyler is he's somewhat ball-dominant player in the sense that he has a high usage. He's a dribbler, as we know. A lot of it is to create space for himself, screens, no screens, whatever, to get into the paint, make his floater, and all the rest. He's not just a spot-up three-point shooter you're running around some screens. He's never really been that, even though he's been a very good three-point shooter at times and shot close to 40% from 3 this year, he was by far the best three-point shooter on the team. But there's a certain style with Kyle that they play that they're not playing now. And this team has adjusted more to this sort of gritty defensive style where they don't have to hide anybody or hide as many people. And offensively, again, who's picked up the extra usage from Tyler? It's been Jimmy Butler. And that's worked out rather well. Okay. Bam Adebayo's usage has stayed about the same as it was in the regular season, which is better than it was, we were talking about a week and a half ago. So he's now up to 18 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, whereas he was 29 and 4 in the regular season. So he's getting closer to where he was. His shot attempts are up at 15. They averaged a little over 15 during the regular season, 16 and a half in the first half of the year, and then 13 and a half afterwards. But anyway, the point is, I'd rather have, and this may be a little controversial, I'd rather have Tyler out than playing the way he was playing when he was hurt in the playoffs last year. okay? Because at least you can make an adjustment to the player being out, and this team has, as opposed to a guy trying to gut it through when he didn't really have anything. And the same to a certain degree with Lowry last year. So I actually think that from a health perspective, this team looks better. Now, the counter is going to be where you had Oladipo last year, and he was actually fourth on the team in minutes in this series against Boston. And I do think there are places that they could have used Vic in this series, okay, to help Caleb and help Jimmy and help Bam guard Tatum and Brown, which is your issue here. And we know that Vic did a very good job at times on Brown last year, because Brown is not a great ball handler, and Vic gets up in you and makes it very uncomfortable for you. So they will miss him to a certain degree, okay? But again, I think having a healthy Lowry with what this team is doing makes the Heat, I think, a little bit more dangerous than they were in the playoffs last year. And also, Jimmy's playing at an even higher level. And we've had all these conversations about Bam that I don't want to have here again, but some have mentioned in the comments. This really has to be a Bam series in a whole bunch of ways. And there's no reason for him to have any fear of Robert Williams, okay? Because Robert Williams is not the same player that he was before those knee injuries. And Bam simply should dominate that matchup. He just should, because Robert Williams is really a non-factor on the offensive end. So he doesn't have to worry about him as much. It's just dives to the rim. That's pretty much it. It's not a multifaceted type player like Brook Lopez is, who can take you out to the three-point line. And then he still has some post skills and all the rest of that. And he's a great defender. It's not all of that, okay? And he's not even the offensive rebounder at this stage that Mitchell Robinson is. So Bam should dominate that matchup. He really should. And he should force Mazzulla to take this guy off the floor and go smaller. And then when he goes smaller, okay, with Derek White and others, Miami should be better defensively, sounder defensively than they were last year, even without Oladipo, because they were playing Hero a lot. And in this case, they don't have to play Robinson as much as they played Hero. And so here you are, you can guard with Vincent and with a more spry Lowry than you had last season. So even though they have Brogdon, which is a huge advantage compared to last year, and even though the Heat don't have Hero, I actually think that Miami is in better position this time around. The thing is the home court advantage. Now, I'm going to take some questions that come in here first as well. Lenny says, is Jimmy okay with the ankle? He's as good as he's going to be. This is the thing with it. There's no fracture from what I've been told by people close to him. Could they be lying to me? Yes. But they're not people who typically do. Okay, so I've been told it's a bad sprain that really needs a couple weeks to fully heal. He doesn't have a couple weeks. He just had 4 days. I don't think him going to a pop-up for his coffee company or the Lids or anything like that is going to affect him in a significant way. He seems to be moving around all right. It's going to swell when he starts pounding it on the hardwood anyway. Okay, it's what's happened. And he really is. We know with his ankles, okay, and some people talk about the shoes that he wears or all the rest of this. His ankles are not great. Like, he's going to have problems with his ankles and with that knee for pretty much the rest of his career. And this is the trade-off that you took when you paid him that kind of money. But what you're getting is these kind of ridiculous playoff performances. So you're okay paying this kind of money. And it looks like that contract's going to turn out just fine. But you're going to deal with these ankle and knee issues. So it's going to swell. The problem with the Eastern Conference Finals is there are no 2-day breaks. It is game, day off, game, day off, game, day off, game, day off. So you get more time in the finals. That will be more spread out. But Jimmy's just going to have to push through this thing right now. That's kind of where they're at. So, again, it's not going to be perfect, but, you know, you just hope you don't have a major setback. But it's why he needs so much help from Bam in this series. It's going to keep coming back to Bam. And it's going to keep coming back to, can the guys make shots playing off the two of them? Boston this year, and I've talked about this on many episodes, talked about this with Amy Audibert, they got off to a tremendous start offensively this season. Historically good through the first 6 weeks, to the point that people were saying that Mazzulla was an upgrade over Udoka as coach. But a couple things happened. One, Robert Williams came back into the fold, and they started playing differently again. So they stopped playing as much drive and kick, 5 out. And they started, playing more conventionally, and they were not as good offensively. They're better defensively, but not as good offensively as they were earlier in the year. But they still got a bunch of good three-point shooting. They really do. Their role guys play off of Tatum and Brown really well. And, there's certain guys I think you want to let shoot a lot of threes, like a Marcus Smart, because regression to the mean eventually with him. But Brogdon and White in particular and maybe Grant Williams, if he gets the minutes, are going to be a problem. And so Miami is going to have to lock down on their three-point shooting. And Amy Audberg said it. She said that was the key stat. She said I believe she said when Miami has held their opponent under 40% three-point shooting, basically they've won in the playoffs. Okay. I don't know the exact stat she gave me. I can't remember, but they basically won. She said that's the key stat. Hold down their three-point shooting. So here are your keys from me. You got to keep their three-point shooting, again, under that 40% number. They're going to shoot volume, so they're going to make some, but you got to make them as inefficient as possible. Bama's got to dominate the matchup with Robert Williams. Jimmy Butler needs to not have another setback. Kyle Lowry needs to stay on the court a lot because they don't have the other options without Hero and Oladipo. And when it comes to Tatum and Brown, there's the variance with Tatum. You have to take advantage of his bad games, okay? Because he's going to have a couple. He's not Jokic, all right? He's not Giannis. He's not like where every game is like, it's not. He has, we saw it in the huge game 6 he had against the Sixers. The huge game 6 was all in game 6. I mean, excuse me, in the fourth quarter. He was awful in the first 3. Okay, he was better in the fourth, obviously, and he carried them in, and they celebrated him, even though he shot like 20% for the first 3 quarters. He's going to have those quarters where he just does not shoot well. Jaylen Brown is more consistent than Tatum is. You have to take advantage of Tatum's bad games or bad quarters. Comes in there. Caleb Martin is the X factor in the series. Didn't play a lot last year. I mentioned that at the beginning. Caleb is a huge factor for them defending both Tatum and Brown. And the other thing here, and this is the other X factor, okay, is that Spoelstra's going to throw about 12 defensive looks at them and make them adjust game to game. This comes in from Van Lee. I'll take a couple comments before we close. We'd prefer to have Tucker in the spot based on how he played Boston in round 2. I mean, I would and I wouldn't. The problem with PJ is, with the exception of the one game that he got off in, you were playing 4 and 5 with him offensively. And I will say this from the Heat's perspective. They wanted PJ back. I've said this many times. They've never denied that. They wanted PJ back. That's why they offered him, they offered him what they felt was a fair deal, which I think was a fair deal. He wanted more money. They didn't have a problem over the 3 years. They didn't have a problem with that. But the thing was, they said at the end of last year, they knew they had to get a little more offensive minded because PJ was making them play 4 and 5 at the, in those situations. And so PJ, particularly down the stretch of games, was tough to play with this particular group. I think you'd have a real problem playing PJ heavy minutes when you don't have Tyler, because you're going to put PJ out there with Jimmy and Bam. You don't have enough offense without Tyler. At least with Caleb, or at least with Love, there's more of Caleb gives you the cutting. He's a better ISO player than I think people give him credit for. He plays above the rim. There are some things he does that PJ doesn't do, and he was a pretty good three-point shooter this year as well, okay? And Love gives you spacing, gives you passing that PJ doesn't necessarily give you. You knew where PJ was going to be. Even with Spoelstra doing more with him than Rivers would, which was expected, he was going to be in the corner a lot. Teams were going to adjust to that, and that's why you saw PJ's numbers kind of come down over the course of the year, or you saw other guys' numbers come down around him because, again, he wasn't creating anything else that was making the defense worry about him. So, no, would I rather have PJ or I would like to have PJ on the roster, but again, if you weren't going to pay the luxury tax, that wasn't really an option. And so I'd rather have Caleb than PJ. I think most Heat fans would, and that's kind of the decision that they had to make. And so I think that worked out. All right, man, we got time for one more question here before we go. I'll mention our sponsors again. Prize Picks, use the code 5FIVE. Get the initial deposit match up to $100. This comes in from, I'll try to read this. See, don't do this when my eyes are bad in the morning. Fly fast as duck. We have to steal game 1. Jimmy will be the healthiest of the series. That ankle is 100%. Will bother him going forward with only 1 day rest the rest of the series. I think that's fair. Miami has tended to play really well in these game 1s on the road. They have 2 more days rest than Boston does. That should be helpful. And they're huge underdogs in the series, again. And they like that position. So we'll see how things go. We will have full coverage today on the channel and everywhere else. We got Predict the Hero comes back game 4, Heat Culture. Appreciate the donation. I don't think that's going to happen based on what I'm hearing. Now, sometimes they don't tell me everything during this time of year in particular, but I was told not to expect Tyler this series, even though I was told that he's a little bit medically ahead of schedule. You take that for what it's worth, okay? Question will be, is Tyler, even when he's medically cleared, which has not happened yet, to shoot and all the rest of this, is he going to be comfortable doing it? It's his shooting hand. We'll see. I don't expect to see him in this series. From everything that I've been told, I don't expect to see him in this series. Okay, the finals are a different situation. Someone else told me inside the organization, not a decision maker, but somebody who's prone to know what's going on. He said, I wouldn't expect to see him this season. That included the finals, but we'll see. Our projections for when he was going to be back from what we were told initially, and even from what the Heat reported, was it could be sometime in the finals. But I don't expect to see him in the Eastern Conference Finals. All right, thanks to everybody. Excuse me, thanks to Manny for producing. Thanks to all Pro Construction Builders. Go to Prize Picks. You want to keep us in business? Good way to do it and make yourself some money. Go to Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Get the initial deposit match up to $100. Have a good day, everybody.